if we're going to follow the real Jesus, according to Christ, one of the key attributes or characteristics that defines us is we must love each other the way that He loved us. By this the world will know we belong to Him, that we are His disciples, His followers, if we have love for one another. John 13, verses 34 through 35. But there were many other things Jesus taught, many other things He commanded, many teachings that He gave us, and we must also incorporate these into our life if we're going to follow the real Jesus. One of them, society refers to as the golden rule. Jesus put it this way: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Matthew 7:12. Do we live our lives that way? Do we really treat other people like we want to be treated? Or do we pull a fast one if we think we can get away with it? Do we overlook our own faults and incongruencies and inconsistencies and shortcomings and yet nail others to the wall for theirs? If that's the case, we're not following the real Jesus. Do we love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and our neighbor as ourselves? What's the passion that consumes us? Love for God, love for other people? Or is it love of self, love of money, love of pleasure? Do we forgive others without condition or limitation? Not once or twice, but like Jesus said, 70 times 7 in a day. Do we forgive others when they wrong us, or do we hold a grudge? If we forgive others, Jesus said, God would forgive us. If not, if we hold others their wrong against them, Jesus said God in heaven would hold our wrong against us. Do we call other people worthless? As Jesus said, Raka? Do we have a condescending attitude? Do we think of others as less than ourselves? Do we treat them as less? If so, we're not following the real Jesus, and His Spirit is not in us. Matthew 5:22. Do we feed the hungry? Give drink to the thirsty? Do we clothe the naked? Do we visit those in prison? According to Matthew chapter 25, verses 31 through 46, in the parable of the goats and the sheep, the difference between the followers of the real Jesus and those who only pay Him lip service was what they did and didn't do. When we throw a feast, do we invite the rich, our neighbors, our friends, only those who would pay us back? Or do we invite the poor, the uncomely, the unlovely, those who cannot pay us back? If we're going to follow the real Jesus, we'll invite the poor. Do we live our lives free from greed, or do we worship money? Matthew 6:24 through 26. Do we store up wealth on the earth and treasure here, or do we put our treasure in heaven? Matthew 6:19 through 21. Do we give, or do we hoard our things on the earth? Luke 12, 16 through 21. According to Christ, loyalty and communion with God is better than great wealth. Matthew 6:33 through 34. Where do our priorities lie? If someone asks us to walk a mile, do we walk 2? Or are we begrudging? Matthew 5:41. Do we believe in the power of God, that He can change anyone, that His grace is strong enough to redeem anyone, that He can forgive anything? Or do we think that there are those beyond His reach? Luke 6:37, Matthew 7:1. Do we seek positions of power over others? Do we exalt ourselves? Or do we seek opportunities of service to others? And do we humble ourselves? Jesus said those who exalt themselves would be brought low, and those who humble themselves would be lifted up. John 13:3-17, Matthew 20:25-28, Luke 22:25-27. Do we walk humbly, or do we exalt ourselves? Matthew 23:12, Luke 14:11, and Luke 18:14. Do we revere and love children? In Matthew 18, verses 3-6, Jesus says the greatest in the kingdom of heaven are those who humble themselves as little children. He even goes as far as to say that if we don't enter into the kingdom of God as little children, we can't enter into the kingdom of God at all. Do we imitate children? Do we emulate their lack of prejudice, their sincerity, their faith, their innocence? If not, we're not following the real Jesus. If we're going to follow the real Jesus, we can't deny Him before men. Jesus said if we confess Him before others, He'll confess us before the Father. And if we deny Him before others, He'll deny us before the Father. Matthew 10, verse 32. But this confession is not merely a verbal confession. It's deeds, it's actions. They speak louder than our words. This confession is not to be rude or obnoxious or selfish or arrogant or prideful, or to have any kind of hatred or prejudice or... No, this kind of confession is speaking the truth in love. This kind of confession is more deeds than action. 1 John chapter 3, verses 16-18 say, Hereby perceive we the love of God, that Jesus laid down His life for us. So we ought also to lay down our lives one for another. So it's saying that love is self-sacrifice, laying our lives down for others, sacrificing our needs for their needs, sacrificing our dreams for their dreams. If we see a brother or sister in need and we say, be warm, be full, I'll pray for you, but we don't give them something to eat or to drink or to wear, something from what we have to help them where they are, how can the love of God be in us? It says, don't love in word or in tongue, but in deed and in truth. We are to love our enemies. We are to bless those who curse us. We are to pray for those who despitefully use us. Matthew 5:44-48, Luke 6:27-28. When someone attacks us, we're not to return their aggression. We're to respond with good for evil and kindness for hatred. We are to offer them forgiveness in response to their bitterness. Luke 6:29-31.